Vincent, Irene Writing. I don't know, you guys. I feel like there's magic in the air tonight. Do you all think so too? I'm feeling a little charge. I think it's between that south wind and that full moon, and we're right in the middle. Anyhow, welcome. I'm Eve Hogan, for those of you who don't know, and we're so happy to have you here. This is our 19th year of doing full moon labyrinth walks on Maui. The first 10 were up at the church up at St. John's in Keokea, and the last 9 have been here, which is just amazing. I was sitting here yesterday watching the rain thinking, I wonder if this will be the first month we've been rained out. And then look at this tonight. It's absolutely beautiful. We haven't been rained out at all in 19 years. It's really amazing. So anyhow, welcome. The way this usually works is that I do a little bit of a talk, if you will, on the labyrinth and how to get the most out of it. And then we go out and walk it by full moon and torchlight. And some people start with this labyrinth and move out to that one. Some would start with that one and move into this one. Some grab two, and we just kind of magically work out. And it's really pretty magical. Again, I'm using that word. I feel like it's in the air tonight. But it's really neat to watch because it almost becomes like a maypole dance where everybody just sort of weaves in and out and around each other, and it's really a beautiful experience. And for any of you who might be thinking, oh, well, I'll listen to the talk and then I'll come back tomorrow when there's nobody here and walk the labyrinth, by all means, come back and walk the labyrinth when no one's here, but don't miss out on the experience of walking it with this many people because it's extremely delightfully different. And I love to tell people, mastering yourself or your meditation or your practice alone is easy peasy compared to mastering it in relationship. And so this is a really great opportunity to just see what emerges with other people around. So at any rate, I invite you all to stay. The labyrinth that we're going to be talking primarily about tonight is the one that's outside, which is, and tell me if this is reflecting too much light, if this is the Chartres Cathedral in France. It's about 40 minutes outside of Paris by train. Have any of you been there? A couple of you? Awesome. Did you get to walk the labyrinth? No? How about you? No? When I was there the first time, it was covered up with chairs also. So if any of you are venturing to France to walk the labyrinth, make sure you call ahead and find out what day of week they take the chairs off. I believe it's Fridays, and I believe they only do it one day a week where you can go and walk the labyrinth without, the first time I was there, I didn't even know the labyrinth was there. The chairs were on top of it, and the whole place is so commanding in an upward, you just look up. It's so huge. It's so amazing, and the stained glass windows and everything, and you're walking around looking up. It never even occurred to me to investigate the floor, right? But it's kind of neat to see it like this and put this into some context. This was built about 800 years ago, around 1200 AD. And it's believed that part of the reason for building it was that it was part of the spiritual tradition to take a pilgrimage to places like Jerusalem. But the problem was that the Crusades were going on, so you could go on your journey and end up encountering religious wars and perhaps not make it home. And unfortunately, there's a similar amount of unrest in the world today, but it wasn't really particularly safe to take a journey like that at that time. And so it's believed that they used the labyrinth within the safety of the church so that people could fulfill that part of their spiritual practice, if you will, without having to risk their lives to do it. And so that's one way to use the labyrinth, just exactly the same way as a pilgrimage to a sacred destination or to an external location has a threefold path. You have the journey to the sacred destination, the time you spend at the sacred destination, and then you have the return journey back home. And this is no different from that. You have the journey in, so there's, for those of you who are not labyrinth familiar, this is not a maze. There are no dead ends, there are no tricks, there are no decisions, you can't get lost, that's the good news. And there's the entrance is right here, and if you follow the path and don't step over any of the bricks or the lines in this labyrinth, it will take you through the entire thing into the center. You stay in the center till you feel complete, and then you take the same path back out. So it's just like the threefold journey of a pilgrimage. You have the journey in, which on a physical pilgrimage represents preparation, if you will. It's those heavy loads you have to carry, the long distances you have to go, the clearing of your schedule, if you will, weather conditions. There's all kinds of things on a pilgrimage you have to endure on the way. And for those of you who are here on a pilgrimage to Maui right now, you know you had to clear your schedules, find someone to take care of the animals, and you have to go through TSA at the airport, and you have to, all these things you have to kind of go through in order to get to the sacred destination. The center represents that sacred destination, and it's here that on a pilgrimage is a time of receiving guidance and insight, or even just the energy of the place. It's sort of where you become a sponge and just sort of soak it all up and see what comes to you in that space. And then you stay here, as I said before, until you feel complete, which for some people you'll just come and go, okay, and turn around and walk back out, and that's fine. And some of you will want to come and just kind of hang out in the center for a little bit and just see what's there for you. For me, it's like that walk-in is much, how do I want to say it? When I sit down to meditate more traditionally, and I try not to think about anything, everything in the whole entire world pops into my head, to the point where I have to keep a journal next to me and just put them all down. I mean, unbelievable ideas pop up. And then when I get quiet, you know, after I go through that for a few minutes, then I get quiet and can get into that peaceful state. And to me, the walk into the labyrinth is kind of that moment where all that stuff may come popping up. And you just notice it and let it go. Notice it and let it go. Notice it and let it go. And then by the time you reach the center, there's a quieting that's there usually for most people, where you can just kind of be there and see what's there for you. And then the return journey back out is to take what you've gained on your pilgrimage and integrate it into your being so that you can implement it in your life. And if you don't have that integration phase, you might just end up having a nice trip to wherever you went and a fun vacation, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to bring about transformation or change in your life, you need to take what you've gained and do something with it. And so that walk back out is really that integration opportunity so that you can really see how to implement it in your lives. So that's another method of using the labyrinth, is just to use it like a pilgrimage and just see what comes up for you. The most important thing, in my opinion, to know about the labyrinth is that you're not walking it to learn about it. You're not walking it to learn about you. And I think one of the biggest, I hate to use the word mistakes because I don't think there is such a thing as it relates to this, but one of the biggest challenges for people is if you don't know that about the labyrinth, you walk it and you go, I just learned that the labyrinth takes a while, or I just learned something about the labyrinth, and you don't realize what the really juicy message was because you're not there to learn about it. And so with that in mind, knowing the language of the labyrinth is very helpful. And in my experience, the language of the labyrinth is metaphor. Whatever you experience on the labyrinth is symbolic or metaphoric of what you need to see in yourself off the labyrinth. And everything is showing you something. Everything you experience. And when you know that, and that you're learning about yourself, not the labyrinth, you start to discover all kinds of interesting things about yourself. So when I first heard about the labyrinth, someone gave me a book called Walking the Sacred Path, and I thought, wow, that's a really cool title. I love that title, right? And for several weeks, the book sat on my desk or on my living room table, and it had a picture of a labyrinth on the front. And I just kind of walked by, and I really love books that you don't actually have to read anything more than the title. Feel the fear, do it anyway. Codependent no more. I like this kind of book. So I'm walking by going, walking the sacred path. Yeah, I'm walking the sacred path. I love that. And then one day I decided to read it. And I picked it up, and I was just amazed by the journey of this labyrinth, and I recognized it as a beautiful experiential tool for people to actually put to practice the concepts that I teach that I was teaching aside from the labyrinth. And so I got really excited about it as a way for people to take these ideas that I gave them and put them to practice to see how they worked right there. So I got really excited about Walking the Labyrinth, and the book was written by a reverend from the Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to go to San Francisco because they have a replica of the short cathedral labyrinth there. So I'm going to go to San Francisco to take a pilgrimage in this labyrinth, right? So I started telling everybody that I was going to fly to San Francisco to walk the labyrinth, and a friend of mine I said, you know there's a labyrinth in Keokea. It's like 40 minutes away. You don't really have to fly all the way to San Francisco. So the very first thing the labyrinth mirrored to me before I even walked it was a spiritual attitude, because I don't want to walk my spiritual, I'm walking a sacred path, but not in a parking lot, right? So I had sort of this spiritual attitude about where that might take place, which of course is ridiculous, because we're walking our sacred path all the time. It doesn't matter if we're in the market or in the parking lot or in the bathroom or in the church or a cathedral or a sacred garden. It doesn't matter where we are. But I wasn't thinking that way at the time. So I actually flew all the way to San Francisco before I drove up to Keokea. And I invited friends with me, which some of you may relate to tonight. If you brought a friend with you and you weren't really sure what you were in for, now it's really stressful. I invited these friends to walk the labyrinth with me, but I'd never done it before. So I slipped off my shoes and I'm telling them all about it, and then I'm walking the labyrinth and I'm thinking, oh no, nothing happens. Oh my God, I flew all the way here and invited friends and nothing happens, and I'm walking the labyrinth really stressing about it. You know how when you're worrying more about whether your friends are having a good time than whether you're having a good time, and then they have a good time and you don't have a good time? That's kind of what happened. So, of course, I'm still thinking I'm learning about the labyrinth, right? So I'm walking it thinking nothing happens in the labyrinth, and then I learned that about the labyrinth. But had I known this concept of metaphor, I would have started to recognize that I was getting in the way of my having an experience in the labyrinth in a couple of different ways. One, I was holding on to expectations, and those expectations were getting in the way of my being able to experience peace, which is really a big opportunity in the labyrinth, is to simply experience peace and to quiet that crazy monkey mind. The other thing that I was learning about myself was kind of an addiction to spiritual drama, because I wanted like an enlightening bolt to hit me, like something really big, you know, something really juicy, and nothing was happening. And then what happened was I got about to this spot, right about here, and I went, oh, no wonder nothing's happened yet. It doesn't happen till you reach the center, and I'm not there yet, right? So I go to walk into the center of the labyrinth, and just as I walked in, the organ music in the cathedral started playing and reverberating through the entire cathedral. And all of a sudden I had that metaphoric aha, that this was like the melodrama accompaniment to this thing I had going on. And all I could do was stand in the center and laugh at myself, because it was so funny to have this whole big thing going on. And then this tourist lady walked right across the labyrinth with her shoes on, and I went into judgment. And I don't know about you guys, but judgment is not high on the list of spiritual qualities I aspire to, but I was doing it. And I'm thinking, doesn't she see what this is? Doesn't she know? She's walking across it with her shoes on. And what's up with that? You know, and I went into all this judgment. And had I realized that I was not there to learn about the labyrinth and other people, but I was learning about myself, I would have had that moment of self-observation and recognizing that I was in judgment, which of course wasn't in alignment. And I also would have recognized that she was on the way to the altar, and I was right in the way of her spiritual path. And it was a really beautiful sort of, I call them an instant reframe, of just being able to see the same situation from a slightly different perspective that changes everything. And suddenly I was able to let that go and realize that. So I invite you, as you walk the labyrinth, just to notice what you notice. Notice what you're learning about yourself as you journey. There's so many things that can pop up in metaphor that it becomes a really juicy field in which it's different every single time, because if you're learning about you, not it, and you're different every time you come to it, there's something new to see all the time as you walk. So what I like to do, and personally, I'm going to give you a couple different ways. One is you can walk it like a pilgrimage, if you so choose. You can walk it like a walking meditation and just take it slow and practice breathing and being mindful. If you simply practice being present as you walk and do nothing else and pay no other attention to any of these other details, but just simply bring your mind back into the present. When you start thinking about the past, take a deep breath. Bring your mind back into the present. When you start thinking about something tomorrow or the next day, take a deep breath, bring your mind back into the present. What you'll find is that the present moment is like the door into which we get to walk into our own center. And suddenly there's peace that fills the space. And it's a really beautiful opportunity to just see if you can let go of all of the thoughts of the past and all the thoughts of the future just for a few minutes. You can have it back anytime you want, and see if you can access peace. We had a man walking the labyrinth one time who said, I didn't get anything out of it. And I said, oh yeah, what'd you notice? And he said, nothing, I just had a deep sense of peace. And I love that, because if that's all you get from this, blessings to you. That's a beautiful thing. But one of the things that I've realized in teaching about the labyrinth for the last almost 20 years is I have looked at it like a metaphoric pilgrimage. I have looked at it and taught it like a journey through life, where you know how we think we've got it figured out and we're cruising along and all of a sudden we fall in love and the whole world throws us for a loop, or we get a new job and everything changes, or we go away to school, or we have kids, or the kids move out, or we retire, somebody gets sick, someone dies, you get married, all of these things that are good things and difficult things that throw us for a 180-degree loop. And so as I looked at teaching the labyrinth, I encourage people to look at the metaphor of their life that might materialize, and do you enjoy these changes, or are they difficult for you? And can you make friends with change? Can you make peace with change? And so that's another way to look at it, if you choose to. But after a long time of working with it, I have now come to the conclusion that the labyrinth is actually a blueprint of us as human beings, and that we all have a sacred center just like this, and we all have our ego mind, which has got our love drama, money drama, housing drama, fitness drama, career drama, all these different kind of dramas going on, if you will. And Einstein said we cannot solve problems from the same kind of thinking that created them. And if we are creating our love drama, our money drama, our housing drama, our career drama, our fitness drama from our ego mind, and we try to resolve it from that same part of our mind, it's not possible, because that just feeds more of it. And so in thinking about all of that, I realized that when we are able to access this part of ourselves, our creativity, our strength, our intuition, our wisdom, our passion, our compassion, our ability to forgive, our ability to be peaceful and centered. When we're able to access that, we can then handle the love drama, the money drama, the fitness drama, and all those different things from a different place in our being that has the resources available to do so. And with that in mind, I invite people to walk the labyrinth practicing what I call 6 essential life skills. You can take them or leave them. You can practice one and no others. It doesn't really matter. They will all come around to you eventually, because I am absolutely convinced that these essential life skills have the ability, if we practice them all the time, so practice them on the labyrinth and use them off the labyrinth, to transform all your relationships, both with yourself and with each other and with spirit. So I'm going to whip through them really fast and then get you guys on the labyrinth, all right? So the first essential life skill I love to share is to remember who you really are. And remembering who you really are may be challenging, so you can use the labyrinth as a reminder to remember yourself as the sacred center. Or the soul essence, if you will. I use this hand gesture to go with that first essential life skill, because it's in India, it's accompanied with Namaste, which means the divine in me greets the divine in you. So in remembering who you really are, whether you know it or not, hold the possibility that who you really are is a divine being, and just see what happens when you hold that possibility. In my experience, when we hold that possibility or invite that part of ourselves to reveal itself to us, it makes steps towards us. My mom used to say, every step you take toward God, God takes 1,000 steps towards you. So I love that concept. So just holding that concept of wanting to know your spirit essence and seeing what happens will invite it to reveal itself to you. So remembering who you really are. One of my favorite quotes is that the breeze of grace is always blowing, but we must set our sails to catch it. And for me, that first essential life skill, if you did nothing else, was to hold a knowing, hold an invitation, or imagine if you did know who you are, what qualities would you embrace? Who would you be? You don't have to know. You just need that you know. Because because I've done this with a lot of groups of people and a lot of individuals, and I'll say, give me some words that you would embrace if you knew who you were. So let's just do that for a second. What are some words, if you knew who you really were, that you would embody? Love. Trust. Kindness. Peace. Forgiveness. Compassion. Gratitude. Joy. Harmonious. Light. See, we already know. I've never, ever, ever asked this and had people go, hatred, anger, prejudice, judgment, fear. I know. Never. It never happens. We all know if we were to be who we really are, what qualities we would be able to step into. So hold that invitation for those qualities to find you and fill you, if you will. And then the second essential life skill, I like to use this hand gesture of identify your target. What are you aiming for? And isn't it interesting that the labyrinth actually looks like a target? What's your target? And even more importantly, what's your bullseye? If your bullseye is to practice self-mastery and to be your most authentic self, that works. If your target is to create loving, harmonious relationships, that works. If your target is to be healthy in body, mind, and spirit, that works. But you want to know what your target is, because if you don't know what your target is, you don't know which way to go. It's like in Alice in Wonderland, she asked the Cheshire Cat which way to go at a crossroads, and he said, well, where do you want to end up? She said, I don't know. And he said, then it doesn't matter which way you go. Which is the same thing. And it's interesting to notice what your bullseye is specifically, because if you have getting the dishes done out here on your target, but harmonious relationships here, you want to be mindful not to sacrifice your bullseye to get your outer, your little manini goals done. You don't want to sacrifice the most important things. So keep in mind what's your most important in terms of what your target is. So you want to remember who you really are and identify your target. And then the third essential life skill is to self-observe. And I use this hand gesture to invite you to rise up and watch yourself and notice what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Notice what stories you're making up. Notice everything and see if it is in alignment with who you are and what you're trying to create. I have people actually put up a target on one end of the room with everything they want in their lives, and then put up a target at the other end of the room with everything they don't want. And then simply self-observe and notice which way you're walking. If you want healthy or harmonious relationships, you want to move this direction. And it's really fascinating to watch how often, kind of because we let our unconscious ego mind go into the driver's seat, that we are walking the opposite way of what we want to create. So in the labyrinth, simply observe. And you don't have to use these hand gestures, but I'm just giving them as a reminder. You want to walk just noticing what you're thinking, noticing what you're feeling, noticing what you're experiencing, so that you can look at the metaphoric lesson of it. If you don't see what you do, you won't be able to learn from it. So notice, if you're walking quickly, do you always move quickly through life? If you're walking slowly, do you always move slowly? I had one 11-year-old girl say she noticed that she always moved slowly, and that sometimes it would serve her to speed up, and sometimes it would serve her to slow down. And how true is that for all of us, that in this area of my life, this pattern works, but in this area, this doesn't work. I had a man walking the labyrinth, and he again said, I didn't get anything out of it. And so I again said, well, what did you notice? And he said, I was trying to figure out how many bricks you used and how long the path is. And it's not symmetrical, so I was trying to figure out how and he was very analytical. And there's nothing wrong with being analytical. In his workplace, it probably served him super well. But in his spiritual life, it may not. And in his relationship, it may destroy it, right? So what you do here may serve you here, but it may not apply to every area of your life as well. So you want to notice what you do as you walk. Simply notice. What happens when we become self-observant is it causes us to become self-aware. And when we're self-aware, we see what we're doing. And when we see what we're doing, we have choices. If I continue this way, it's going to go there. If I continue this way, it's going to go here. now I have a choice. So the fourth essential life skill is where it's your choice. Make the choice. And if I want to go this way, I'm going to need to recalibrate with my spirit. And so for me, that motion between the choice point and recalibrating, for me, and you may have a different way of doing it, is to take a deep breath and set the intention to realign. Just take one breath, a deep breath, and reconnect with your spirit self, your soul essence, all those qualities you named. And then choose your next words. This is the sixth essential life skill. Choose your next words, thoughts, and actions in alignment with who you are and what you're trying to create. Now that's a lot in the beginning to remember. Remember who you really are, identify your target, self-observe, make the choice to recalibrate with who you really are, and choose words, thoughts, and actions in alignment. It's a lot to remember at first, and it's a lot to practice at first, and then it happens in one breath. And that one breath can change the course of your relationships. That one breath can change the course of your life. When the caca hits the fan, so to speak, and you already know who you are, you don't have to do that. You don't have to think, now who am I? You don't, because you already know. And you don't have to think through what your target is, because you already know if you want to practice self-mastery or you want to have a healthy, harmonious relationship. You already have aligned your path, if you will. Where you must kick in to high gear is in self-observation, because if you don't know what you're thinking or saying or doing, then your ego mind will for sure be the one to make the choice. And if your ego mind is the one to make the choice, it's going to go that way. It's not because it's a bad guy, it's trying to protect you, but it doesn't know how. I like to put it like this. The ego's like the guy at the front of your relationship, so you got a cruise ship, right? You use your relationship. The ego's the guy in the front yelling, iceberg, 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 and then erratically wants to grab the wheel and make the iceberg move. The iceberg isn't the one that needs to move. The other person isn't the one who needs to move. We want to put our captain, our spirit, back into the captain's wheel and know that just a slight course direction can avoid that iceberg entirely. But the iceberg's not going to move. And when we recognize it's our responsibility to alter course when something's scaring us, we can totally change the direction of everything and move it in alignment with what we're trying to create. So why I bring all this up on the Labyrinth? It's because it's a great place to practice. The center reminds you of who you really are. The whole thing looks like a target. And as you walk, simply notice what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and then take a look at it. See what it's showing you. See if there's another way to do it. See if you can experiment on the Labyrinth. See if it's telling you something about your life off the Labyrinth. So if you're walking the Labyrinth and you're judging people, there's going to be all kinds of fun to have, because we'll give you things to do. But when you notice you're doing it, you get to look at that and say, is this in alignment with who I am and why I'm here tonight? And if it is, continue. And if it's not, take a deep breath and let that go and see what happens when you set yourself free of trying to control and change and judge people you have no control over. You set yourself free of that. Just for a minute, you can always do it again. Just for a minute. See what happens. And if you're walking the Labyrinth and you go into self-doubt and you're thinking, am I doing this right? Am I going the right way? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Am I in that person's way? Am I lost? Self-doubt is what plagues you. So look at that. Is that serving you? Does that plague you off the Labyrinth as well? And give yourself freedom from that. You cannot do it wrong. Because even if you do something wrong, it will be a great aha that you get to see in yourself. So let that go and see if you can set yourself free. And see what shows up. We had a couple walk to the center of the Labyrinth, and she got up to walk out, and he felt uncomfortable staying there without her. They came together, and he should be with her. So he got up to walk out, even though he didn't feel complete, and accidentally stepped over the line and found himself back in the center. And it was a perfect metaphor for him, at looking at what he compromises to be in a relationship and whether it's even necessary. So those accidents are perfect metaphors. So watch and see what you discover about yourself as you journey. Okay? There are no rules for walking the Labyrinth. You can do anything you want. So if somebody's doing something really funny, we all get to practice. But there are some guidelines to help you. So first of all, you want to find your own pace. So like I said before, some people are going to want to walk it slowly, like a breath with each step. Some people are going to want to walk it quickly. Just notice how you do it and experiment with what feels authentically right for you. The only challenge there is when the slow person and the fast person find each other. And so it's helpful to know that it's okay to pass. And the easiest way to pass is on these 180-degree turns. So if the slow person is going into a turn, instead of following them all the way through the turn, if you simply step over the line and turn at the same time as they're turning, you will suddenly be in front. So if my hand's the slow person, instead of following them all the way through so that I'm still behind them, when they go into the turn, I simply step over the line and turn, and now I'm in front. Okay, so you can do that. The other thing is on those 180-degree turns, there's a little more space to pull a step aside, if you will. So if somebody's behind you and you want them to pass you, you can step aside and let them by and then get back on the path. The only words of wisdom on that are if you step aside and you're looking up at the moon and the firelight dancing in the trees and this is so beautiful, and then you look back down and that person's long gone and both paths look exactly the same. You can easily reverse your direction, so just be mindful if you want to continue progressing to do noticing with it. If you do it wrong, it's all going to be a good lesson, so don't worry. So it's a and the other thing you want to know is it's a two-way street, meaning those of you who have gone into the center and have turned around to come back out are going to encounter those coming in face to face. And it's a very interesting moment to observe, because when you first come upon someone face to face, one of two thoughts usually pops up. I have to tell you, this is something so funny. I'll tell you that in a second. One of two thoughts usually comes up. Either, what did they do wrong? You did something wrong, right? So we go into judgment about the other person and assume they did something wrong. Or, what did I do wrong? We go into self-doubt and think we did something wrong. So just know that neither of you have done anything wrong. You just have to step off and get by each other. So the funny thing I was going to tell you is I shared this at a Labyrinth walk the other day, because we're doing these on Thursday afternoons at 3 now as well. And I shared this the other day, and this guy came up to me and goes, you know what I always think when I get that, like right there with somebody, like in the aisle on an airplane, you know, when you have to pass each other, I think, do I go by crotch first or butt first? Like, really? I never thought that. So maybe that's what'll pop up. You never know. You can step this way and not go for either. All right. So it's a two-way street. And then I always like to let people know that sometimes emotions emerge on the Labyrinth, but it's a super safe place to release them. So if you suddenly feel like giggling, giggle. And if you suddenly feel like crying, cry. And everybody here, I'm sure, will just lovingly send you energy from afar. And it's a perfectly safe place to just do what you need to do. Okay? After the Labyrinth walk, I typically watch to see when we're pretty much all off the Labyrinth, and then I ring this gong much louder than that. And if you're able to stay for the sharing, it's always a super wonderful part of the experience to hear what other people's metaphors were. And sometimes you're part of them. Like sometimes, oh, the person was going slowly and it made me think of and remind me to slow down. Like you suddenly find out that what you were worrying about was actually a blessing to somebody else, and it becomes a really great aha experience. So I invite you to stay if you can. We are a nonprofit, and we don't charge a fee for this event, but we do have donation boxes if you're able and willing. There's one over by the candle offering over there. There's one on the front table over there. There's one right over here. Nancy, can you point right in front of you? Right there. There's one. So if you are able to support the garden, that's a beautiful thing, and we greatly appreciate it. And because some of you are going to trickle out, I'm just going to end on this note that I'd like to remind you as you leave tonight to be mindful of the hairpin turn and drive really mindfully in and out of this street, because I don't want anybody to be harmed. But I also want to invite you to consider where the beginning of this spiritual journey tonight begins and ends. So we walked this 38-foot circle out here. Did it begin when you walked in, you spent the time in the center of the Labyrinth, and then you returned your journey back out and then it was over? Or did it begin when you left home and you drove this winding path to the sacred center, and then you returned back out the same winding path that brought you here? Or for those of you who flew here, did it begin when you flew across the ocean and you're here in the sacred center of Maui? And then it ends when you go back home the same way you came in. Or did it begin with birth? And we're here in the sacred center of life. And it ends when we go out through death. Or is it bigger than that? I love to pose that question because I think we sometimes get very rigidly caught up in our methods, and we even think that the only way to do this is, let's say you have a great experience on the labyrinth, is now I need a labyrinth, and what am I going to do now? I've got to have a labyrinth. And, you know, they're all over the planet now. You can look them up on Google. There's like a labyrinth locator, so you can do them, but I don't want anybody to think you need a labyrinth to practice this. These essential life skills can follow you everywhere, as does your spiritual journey. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and I hope you stay for the sharing, but if not, enjoy. Bless you. Thank you. Spread the word. We're not the secret garden. We're the sacred garden. So tell everybody about us. So thank you so much. I'll meet you outside. And thank you, Irene Writing. She's Maui harpist.